What's going on is Anton from AntonDaniels.com. I appreciate you guys for continuing to rock with me. Looking at this article, and I'm always in tune with what's going on financially, whether it's Bloomberg, Business Insider, Market Watch, Yahoo Finance, so on and so forth, right? Ran into this article and it says bringing down inflation might cause your rent to rise. Now, just a little bit of insight before we really get into it. The Fed is working feverishly, and I don't know whether to give Biden credit or just to acknowledge what is going on. Even though Biden specifically won't talk about inflation, inflation is the thing that is most on consumers' minds. When you're talking about the voting public, when you're talking about the federal government, and I don't think this is just at the footsteps of Biden specifically. Like this is bad economic policy. This was printing too much money. This was trying to artificially inflate what was going on in the economy. This has been going on for a long time. And I did a video yesterday where I highlighted and I broke down to you guys that even though wages are higher than they ever been in US history, when you account for inflation, which is basically the value of your dollar, it is actually much lower. We are very much in the exact same boat as we were 40 years ago as far as what the real value of a dollar is. So let's just say, for example, you were making $5 an hour 30 years ago. That $5 an hour stretch just as far, if not less, today, accounting for inflation for whatever it is you make, $30 an hour, right? Because the cost of goods and services, the cost of your car insurance, food, gas, your rent, so on and so forth, is going up along with it. Now, in this article specifically, is saying that they're going to solve for inflation, and they are. They're not going to let this become Venezuela. They're not going to let this become some third world country, right? Inflation will be solved for, and the value of a dollar is going to be the value of a dollar. Money is going to be money, even though it'll be much easier to become a millionaire. It'll be an issue when it comes to what a millionaire really means and what it means to really be living the rest of your life off of $1 million. You can't do it depending on what your lifestyle is, right? But the people that are going to bear the biggest brunt, not translated this, right? The people that are going to bear the biggest brunt, it's not just going to be people that rent. It's going to be the middle class in general, right? Let's go into the article. Britt and Danielle have been renting an apartment in Pasadena since 2014. Earlier this year, the couple decided they were ready to fulfill their American dream, owning a home. Then they found out how much a loan would cost them. The mortgage rates went up pretty significantly, and it didn't make sense at all to buy a home, she said. March 2 weeks after the Federal Reserve announced its first interest rate hike in more than 3 years, they renewed their lease. Thankfully, the landlord didn't hike the rent for us, and that made our decision easier. In areas such as gas prices and food costs, the Fed appears to be gaining ground in its war on inflation, according to the preliminary indicators. But in wielding the only weapon at its disposal, it may be exacerbating inflation on a key line of many household budgets, which is rent. So basically, what they're saying is that even though inflation went up from 8% to 8.6% to 9.1% inflation, right? And the people that continue to benefit from it is those that own assets, including the luxury asset class, real estate, different things that's in your portfolio, basically the things that continue to appreciate over time. The biggest thing that the Fed has in their arsenal to be able to combat inflation is basically to be able to raise rates. So what that means to you and me, it means that the cost of doing business, goods and services, and basically the cost of borrowing money is going to go up, right? And it's not even at an egregious rate, because a few years ago, interest rates, for example, for borrowing to get a mortgage for a home was somewhere between 5 and 6%. So just because money was super duper cheap and they added in all of these other things like stimulus checks and rent moratorium and so on and so forth, just because money was super cheap, and then we also got people begging for their student loans to get canceled, and then you got basically interest on your loans is not really going. So instead of people making an adjustment and paying off their stuff, they decided to increase their lifestyle, and then they're going to be telling Biden that they can't pay for their student loans. But that's a completely different conversation. They're saying that the only tool that the Fed truly have in its arsenal is to raise the cost of money. And raising the cost of money does drive down inflation over time, but it does not give an immediate impact. So what you're going to see is that you're going to continue to face landlords that adjust for whatever the market value is because there isn't enough homes still, and they're going to raise the rates. Okay. Since March, the Fed has raised rates twice more by a half a percentage point in May and 3/4 of a point in June. Rate hikes have driven mortgage prices even higher, leading people to postpone buying homes and look for rentals instead. In Southern California, the number of homes sold in June was down 25% year over year, according to data from DQ News. With a shortage of housing supply, that means higher inflation in rents, meaning that when people are not buying homes and they're making the adjustment to go ahead and rent, that means that the market for rent goes up and we make more money. Now, me, on the other hand, I have never raised the rent, right? I don't even think about it. If somebody is continuing to be with me long term, I'd rather have a good tenant for an extended period of time than to try to make more money and squeeze them. Let me say that once again. And that's a completely different hack. So make sure y'all join the Patreon, because we have conversations like this and we have mastermind sessions and build your business, and we have a Discord where we discuss every single thing that you can possibly think of, including build a business, including how it is that you need to move in corporate America, what your investments are, real estate, and things like that. But me personally, I don't believe in raising the rent on my lessees. Now, there are other people that think a little bit differently and they try to maximize it, which in my personal opinion, you run into other problems. However, I don't raise the rent. So, the cost of inflation is largely not impacting the people that rent from me. But that also means that I'm just a good person, right? But what you're seeing landlords do across the board is because there is a housing shortage, according to many indicators in the economy, and because people are now opting out of what it takes in order to buy a home, because even though rates are, similar to what they have been for an extended period of time, the cost to purchase these homes are increasing. And so demand is dropping because they are facing inflation and the cost of these homes are incredibly high. And people are leaning more into trying to find a good place to rent. And so that makes for a great situation for landlords, which can then capitalize off of said duress. Okay. A little bit more. From here, economists say it would take one of two things to tame rent inflation: the Fed raising rates even more to force a recession, which we've talked about, or an increase in housing supply sufficient to match the rising demand. You'll never have enough housing supply to match rising demand. I think that people are always going to exponentially grow. And one thing that we've seen during the pandemic is when things got tough, people moved back in and they started to branch out a little bit more. And one of the things that we have to do in order to solve for what we're seeing in these cities is we have to get people to go back to work, because then that would allow for the economy to get back humming the way that it's supposed to. Not just wages, not just businesses, so on and so forth, but there's a trickle down effect for somebody going out, spending money at the gas station, buying a little snack here and there, going out for lunch, doing the things that normal people do when they're inside of a great economy. So, I think that people don't understand that those that are going to bear the brunt, the majority of what goes on in our economy, from rent, inflation, the Fed, are people that are in the middle class. The middle class is going to continue to be hollowed out, in my opinion. There will be no middle class soon, even though you guys will try to designate. Maybe I'll do a whole show on what's the difference between poor, middle class, and rich. That sounds like a fire idea. Anyways, I love you. I appreciate you. I'm curious to know what you guys are thinking. Let me know what your thoughts are. I am going to talk to you guys later, but I need you to do me one more favor before we get up out of here. Make sure you share this with your family and friends, because we don't want to be rich by ourselves. If you need to get in touch with me personally, email me at antondaniels413@gmail.com, and then make sure you tap into the Patreon. Link is in the description as well as pinned to the top of the chat. I'm going to talk to y'all later. Peace.